G'day. About 30 years ago, I did some volunteer work teaching meditation in a psych ward in a major hospital in Melbourne. One day, a fellow turned up and the staff explained to me that he would admit himself as an outpatient when the voices started to tell him to kill his wife and kids. Now, although he had a serious psychiatric condition, it would be quite wrong to say he was mad. He had a great deal of insight. He was able to rise above his internal state and see it for what it was. He was demonstrating sanity. He knew he was sick and he sought help. There's a lot of ordinary madness in our world. Most people actually don't display that degree of insight. They're submersed, thoroughly submersed in their own internal image of themselves. They don't question it. I made a video titled "The Buddha Was a Crank," and I could easily have made a much nicer video. That video was simply reflecting the state of Buddhism as it is today. But I think that over the 2,500 years since the Buddha died, my opinion is his message has been thoroughly corrupted and lost. It seems very clear to me that what the Buddha was trying to explain to people is that we have a self-image, and it's our attachment to that self-image which is the source of that suffering which we create for ourselves and we could actually avoid. When you see things from that perspective, a lot of what you see in life suddenly makes sense. When you see all the conflicts that we create for ourselves, all the misery we create for ourselves, it's possible to just fob it off as, oh, it's political or it's religious or it's ethnic. But religious conflict, one of the classics was the Troubles in Northern Ireland, where it was Protestant Christians against Catholic Christians. Now, it wasn't all Protestants against all Catholics. It was the extremes of both sides who proceeded to drag the rest of the society into their madness. But it was the self-image, the attachment to the self-image. I'm a Protestant or I'm a Catholic, therefore you're my enemy. Unrecognized attachment to a self-image. Something which the gentleman with the voices managed to see clearly. We've got the current conflict in Gaza, where again, it's extremists on both sides have dragged the entire culture into chaos. Politics, capitalism versus communism, wars fought over it. Democracy versus dictatorship. Ethnic cleansings. I'm born black and I hate you because you're white, and vice versa. You were born on that side of the hill You're not my tribe. These are all self-images, and they're constructs of the mind. They're conceptualizations. They're models of reality that we form in our mind. Now, it makes a great deal of sense if you interpret what the Buddha was trying to teach people, that once you see through that, once you recognize that who you think you are is just a mental construct, then all of the associations and the attachments that go with that drop away. And you no longer create misery and pain for yourself based on what you believe about yourself. That seems to make a lot of sense to me. Whereas Buddhism, as it's presented in all its various forms, makes no sense. And it's interesting when you look at Buddhism, all these different forms of Buddhism are actually geographically isolated from each other. When I was working in that psych ward, I struck up a relationship with a long-term psychiatric nurse. She'd been doing that job for a long time. And she made this comment to me that she'd noticed that her definition of what constituted normal had widened a little bit. So it was a very hothouse environment. It was very different. The psychology of the environment inside the psych ward was a different world to just outside the glass doors. When you look at the history of Buddhism, people segregate themselves from society, become monks, and develop their own little world. And their definition of normal changes. If you're born and grow up in a city, and especially if it's a bit of a violent city, your definition of what's normal is quite different to somebody who grows up in a quiet little rural town where everybody knows everybody and it's quite peaceful. The skills and the self-image that you'll develop quite different. In Northern Ireland, there was a violent period for a long time, and violence became normalized. And the way people reacted to each other was confined to that area. If you're in a brutal environment, violence becomes normal, and your self-image accustoms to that. Who you think you are is a function of the environment you're in. So we had all these Buddhist monks isolating themselves, creating their own little world. And I think that's the mechanism by which the Buddha's message got lost. And when you see the different kinds of Buddhism, Zen Buddhism got started on a little island on the edge of the Pacific. Mahayana Buddhism found a home up in the Himalayas. Different geographical areas produced different kinds of Buddhism. And over 2,500 years, they're far removed from the reality that was what the Buddha was talking about, in my opinion. And the essential insight that the Buddha provided about self-image and the role that it plays has been lost entirely. Now, these different traditions that have what I'm saying is a distorted message, they've also got their meditation practices, which reinforce the distortion. If you're dealing with conceptualization and the problem is attachment to what you conceptualize, a unquestioned belief is the attachment, the unexamined belief, taking it for real when it's just your own personal mental image of the world and of yourself. If you're going to break out of that, well, you need an approach which reattaches you to reality and is not conceptual itself. Now, a lot of these meditation techniques are conceptual. Visualization, that's pure conception. Various practices that are interpreted via the philosophy is polluted with conceptualization. You need to find some way to actually connect with reality. Now, I'm teaching a meditation technique where I'm emphasizing the emotional experience. That's non-conceptual. Your emotions happen to you. They come unbidden. You experience and you feel as a result of that experience. Only afterwards do you conceptualize. It's a path to reconnecting with reality, which doesn't involve some kind of distortion. It's a recognition of how you actually feel. It's your closest connection to reality that you actually have. Being able to see yourself as you are is actually sanity. See you later.